My name is John Hornsby. I'm here from the Lafayette area, and my story started in 2009. It was April 19th. I was an avid runner. I had run over 130 miles already that year. And the next morning, got up to go to work, couldn't even make it to my truck. And I hadn't been to a doctor probably in 10 years. Never went to the doctor. So my wife knew that something was pretty serious. Anyway, I still tried going to work. I made it to work. I worked an hour away at a nuclear power plant. Get to my parking lot, couldn't make it to my office, called my wife. She had to come pick me up. And from there, we went for about 6 months worth and saw 32 different doctors, went to the Mayo Clinic. And the ultimate thing I got told was I had a idiopathic autoimmune disease that was attacking my nervous system, and I was going into autonomic failure. My heart rate just sitting down would go from 30 to 40 beats per minute up to 120 on its own. My blood pressure would go from 100 over 60 to 150 over 120 on its own. I couldn't breathe correctly. I was falling apart. I had muscle fasciculations where I was twitching all over the place. Pretty much every muscle in my body would twitch. I'd have shooting pains everywhere in my body and just complete exhaustion. I couldn't do anything that I was doing before. You know, during that period of time, I tried running one time. I went about 100 feet and I fell. Couldn't pick up my son anymore. Couldn't do pretty much anything. So this, takes us into 2010. I do this now for 2 more years, dealing with more doctors, and I'm steadily getting worse. Eventually, I had to quit my job. We weren't living in the Lafayette area at the time, and we moved to Lafayette. And we get here, and somehow we get hooked up with a lady who's a naturopath here. Not sure if I should say her name or not, but Sandy Cambry. And we go see her, and she does some testing of her own on me. So I'm very skeptical. I had been seeing various people here and there. And so I said, okay, go ahead. Didn't give her any of my records. Well, she runs her little test and she starts rattling everything off on my Mayo paperwork. I said, that's funny. I said, who gave you my paperwork? She said, I swear I didn't get it. And my wife said the same thing. All right. What do you want me to do? Because she nailed everything. Everything that tested positive in my blood work, from West Nile virus to cytomegalo to Epstein-Barr, all these things that show positive from the Mayo Clinic, she popped off on this test she did. Well, she rattled off Lyme disease. She said, John, I'm pretty certain you have Lyme. She gave me some information. She said, I want you to go read this about Dr. Roy Rife. She said, once you read all this, because she knew I had a science background and I'd be highly skeptical, which I was, go read this. So I read everything. I come back and I tell us, all right, where do I go? Well, she said, you need to go see Brett and Tina DeLong. So, all right, I go to Brett's house. Now, you want to talk about the lowest point in my life? I'm at a man's house, don't know, sitting in a living room with a bunch of people in there I don't know, some old lady sitting next to me knitting. They got parrots on over there making all kind of racket, and I'm just looking at my wife going, okay, this is it. It can't get any worse than this. God, if this doesn't work, just take me. So Brett turns on all his instruments, and within probably 5 to 10 minutes, my symptoms were there at the time, but they got about 100-fold. And I just sunk into the chair. Now, my wife was there with me, but she was on the other side of the instruments and she couldn't see. She couldn't see me behind the computers and the lights. Brett asked me, he says, John, are you okay? And I could barely even answer him. No. So my wife pops up, looks at me, and I was terrible. Well, everything I read told me that if this occurred, that it was working. And I understood, the science behind it and exactly what it was talking about. So after I got over that episode of 3 days of couldn't even function, I went right back to Brett's. Well, went back again another 3 days later. Kept doing this for about 3 to 4 weeks. For 4 years, I had a feeling in my head where it felt like I was on a roller coaster. I would lose my balance. It wasn't vertigo. Every doctor said I had vertigo. I went to the Mayo Clinic. They did all the testing for vertigo, and they couldn't prove it. Nothing. Told them I didn't have vertigo. Woke up one morning after about 4 weeks of going to Brett's, and it was gone. And I told my wife, I woke up, I said, it's gone. She said, what you mean it's gone? I said, that feeling in my head is gone, and it hasn't been back since. So after that happened, I went back to Brett's and said, I want to buy a machine, and we bought it. Now, that was in December of 2012, roughly, and we bought the machine. We ran it consistently for the next 3 to 4 months, and I started running again in February of 2013 and haven't stopped. Now, for 4 years, I couldn't even think of doing any of that. So, you know, if it wouldn't be for meeting Sandy, getting hooked up with her, getting tested, getting told I had Lyme, and then finding this beam ray machine, I wouldn't probably be sitting here today. I would be on disability in a wheelchair or even worse. There's no doubt in my mind, because I was headed downhill.
So how are you today?
Today I'm still running. I've run over in 2013 I ran 140, 150 miles, and I'm still running today. In fact, I played basketball at my daughter's high school against the boys. I'm actually feeling better now than I actually did before I got sick. Odds are I probably had this for a long time, and the stress of where I worked or some environmental factor, something kicked it off and knocked my immune system down to where the Lyme could take over. There's no doubt in my mind that's what happened. I've probably been having this since I was a teenager or even earlier. And, you know, my daughter has it, my wife has it. My daughter pretty much has the same story. Wasn't growing correctly, her hair wasn't growing, she was short, she was stunted. And after running the light, she was having seizures. All that's gone now.
And how old is she?
She's 15. She sprouted up since we got the light. She's grown about a foot and doing very good in school. She was actually failing before we got the light. It's just been phenomenal. I mean, the whole entire thing, you know, and it's hard to believe. It's hard to make people understand this. And, you know, like I said, I was extremely skeptical with my science background and my, you know, everybody says I got the engineering, you know, look and aspect and all that, but it makes you very doubtful when you hear this. But if you read everything on Royal Rife and you read what happened back then, it puts it all together for you. Makes it easier to accept. And when you actually sit there and you do it and you see the results of it, there's no doubt about it, you know. And there's people that I still can't convince, but for whatever reason, they'll have to make that decision on their own. But it's worked out. And, you know, I suggest to anybody who is doubting this whatsoever, it doesn't hurt to try. It doesn't hurt to try. And that's what I tell everybody. I'll explain my story. I tell them what happened with me, and most of them know me. And they saw where I went, where I was, where, you know, how I got very sick, ill, couldn't do anything, and where I'm at now. And they know it's not the drugs that I was taking with the doctors, because those didn't work. I was on 5 different immunosuppressant drugs at one point. I was getting infusions of Rituxan. I was on Humira, methotrexate, and Imuran, and taking steroids. And none of that worked, and I was continuing to get worse. After I went to Brett's, as soon as I had that feeling in my head go away, I stopped taking all the medications on my own. I called my doctor up, said I stopped taking them. He didn't like that. And by January of 2013, that next January, you know, 2 months later, they had 1 more or 2 more that I was still taking, and I had to wean off. I've been completely free of pharmaceuticals. I take nothing except some all-natural supplements that the naturopath that I go to gives me, and I do the light. That is it. So you're looking at $300,000, 4 years, Mayo Clinic, 32 doctors, versus a $5,000 investment and taking some natural vitamins, which we all need anyway. So that's my story.
And it's a good one.
Can't get any better than that.
No, you can't.